As President-elect Trump's pick for defense secretary is vowing to fight on, his selection appears to be in serious peril. Hegseth was back on Capitol Hill today, meeting with senators, including Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Roger Wicker, even as 3 GOP sources tell NBC News that at least 6 Republican senators are not comfortable supporting Pete Hegseth's bid to lead the Pentagon. That comes as NBC News reports that 10 current and former Fox News employees say Hegseth's drinking concerned his colleagues. 2 of them said Hegseth smelled of alcohol before he went on the air on more than a dozen occasions. One of the sources said they smelled alcohol on him as recently as last month. Hegseth says he spoke to President-elect Trump this morning and that Trump told him, quote, "I'm behind you all the way." Here's Hegseth with SiriusXM's Megyn Kelly earlier today.
He said to me when I left his office when he chose me, was, well, besides what he said about being a warfighter, we can get into that, was you're going to need to be tough. You're going to need to be tough. But he paused again as I was walking away and said, but you're the man for this moment. Ultimately, he reiterated the same thing this morning. Hey, Pete, I got your back. It's a fight. They're coming after you. Get after it.
Also in that interview, Hegseth denied allegations he has a drinking problem. He denied allegations he sexually assaulted a woman in 2017. And he lashed out at the media, claiming a, quote, smear campaign against him. He acknowledged personal struggles, though, like cheating on his wives, and he vowed to stop drinking altogether if he runs the Pentagon. Hegseth also telling Megyn Kelly about his discussions with the president-elect about overhauling the Department of Defense.
Clean house of the woke crap, all that stuff, all the climate stuff and the CRT and the DEI and the genderism and the get rid of it. Let's bring the Pentagon back to the people, the people's Pentagon for warfighters. And that's the message he gave to me that I've projected back to senators, and it resonates.
But on Capitol Hill, some Republicans are now expressing concern or at least caution about Hegseth's nomination.
The articles I've read, yeah, some of them are concerning. I don't know if it's true or not, but he'll go through the process. He'll be asked about it. We'll see what happens.
These allegations that have come up just in the last 12 to 14 hours are a surprise to all of us. And so, yes, he does need to address those because this was not something of which we were aware, nor was President Trump aware.
And with Senate support seemingly wavering, sources familiar with the decision-making telling NBC News alternate names are already being floated to replace Hegseth, including Senators Joni Ernst and Bill Hagerty, as well as Congressman Mike Waltz, who's currently Mr. Trump's pick for National Security Advisor. Also apparently in the mix is Trump's one-time primary rival, fellow Florida man, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Joining me now, NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube, NBC's senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake, and NBC's chief political analyst Chuck Todd. We'll call you senior just for fun.
Call me senior citizen. That's how I feel.
Boy.
There you go.
Courtney, first to you. Take us behind your reporting. You spoke with current and former Fox employees about how significant the recency of these allegations could be regarding his alleged drinking, too.
Yeah, that's right, Allie. So our colleagues Chloe Melas, Sarah Fitzpatrick, and I, we spoke with 10 current and former Fox News employees. And over the course of a matter of years, from the time that Pete Hegseth started at this popular weekend show, Fox and Friends, really in 2017, up until relatively recently, these individuals laid out this pattern of behavior by him during this time. And it included him showing up at some cases minutes before the show was on the air, and sometimes talking about being hungover, not having slept much, not sleeping at all, coming straight into the show after being out, and in some cases, even still smelling of alcohol from the partying from the night before. Now, these individuals, I should say, they did not give us cases where he didn't show up at all or where he was visibly drunk on the air. But this kind of behavior caused pressure and stress for the staff on that show, and they laid out how it really impacted the individuals who were working on the show every single day. Look, everyone here who we're talking to, including our senior citizen, Chuck Todd, know we all know what it takes to put together a television show. It takes a universe of people. And when you have someone who is coming in and who's causing that level of stress and anxiety early in the morning and adding in an element of instability, it really impacts many people on the show. Now, I should say the Trump transition team, they completely denied this. They called the allegations false. You played a little bit of Pete Hegseth on Megyn Kelly's podcast today. He also denies it. He does acknowledge that he has, had a drink in the past, including when he came back from deployment. But he said that he's never been accused, or no one's ever told him that he needs to go to rehab or he has a drinking problem. Again, though, I will say this was a story that we worked on for about 3 weeks. Yeah. We spoke with even more than the 10 individuals who are cited in this story. It was very well reported. And the one thing I will say, Ali, that might be lost on people who are listening to this reporting or reading the story, many of the people we spoke with we're not trying to go after Fox News here. Yeah. This wasn't an allegation against the channel or the network or the show even. These were people who, just about every one of them, had concerns about his character going into a job like Secretary of Defense. And I really feel strongly that the people we were talking to, that was the motivation here. It wasn't about smearing this man. It was about concerns about his eligibility for this job, Ali.
Yeah, and Court, your reporting is always so tight. That's why we look at stories like this as important as they are. But also, I mean, can you extrapolate out from this specific instance that you're talking about? I mean, a show is a few dozen people tops. I mean, I think people wish their shows were larger than a dozen from a staff perspective. He's now being tasked with being in charge of an agency of hundreds of thousands at this point. I mean, why are these examples that you tease out indicative of a potential problem should he get this job?
Yeah, and I have to say, it's been really fascinating to watch from the time that Donald Trump announced him as his pick to be Secretary of Defense until today. At the beginning, there was a lot of talk about the policy decisions he might make. Women in combat, transgenders serving openly and having access to health care within the military. That has really shifted to his character and his background and the jobs that he's had in the past that would make him really eligible for this. The reality is the secretaries of defense that we have had in the past have consistently had usually decades of experience running a government agency, running the military, 4-star generals who we have right now, a retired 4-star general, but people with extensive experience in running large institutions. And he simply doesn't have that. He has the military experience, but he never was in charge of anything larger than a platoon. So he was never really in charge of a large group of people. Yeah. I also think that I hope it's not lost on our viewers just the magnitude of this job. 3 million people, $900 billion budget. It's overwhelming even to people who are the most seasoned government employees, Ali.
Court, thanks so much for bringing your latest reporting. Garrett, I want to go to you because when I passed you in the hall yesterday on the Hill and even today before I left to come here, it did feel like there was something in the air, this sense of inevitability that there's no way Hegseth can possibly continue in this role. And yet, might he? I mean, what are you hearing at this point?
Yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, that's going to be Donald Trump's choice and Pete Hegseth's choice made in some combination. And for right now, Pete Hegseth has clearly made the choice that he wants to keep fighting. He told reporters today that that's what Donald Trump has asked of him. And that's what we're seeing today in a way we frankly hadn't seen up until now. He's been addressing reporters in the hallways. He sat for that interview with Megyn Kelly. He got his mom to appear and say nice things about him on Fox News, something that's always helpful to have your mom talking kindly about you. It's clear that he wants to keep this going in a way that, for example, Matt Gaetz apparently didn't a couple of weeks ago. But also, the vibe among senators isn't great. Joni Ernst just left a meeting with him a few minutes ago. She wouldn't say anything other than what she put out in a tweet, that it was a frank and thorough conversation. I talked to Shelley Moore Capito, Republican from West Virginia, who sounded a little bit skeptical of Hegseth, said they had kind of a difficult meeting, that she thinks he needs to do more. I think the sense is if the vote were today, he would lose. But it's not today, and he's got time to turn it around, especially if Donald Trump is willing to be patient, which isn't always his strength, but it does seem like he's not ready to pull the plug on Hegseth, at least not today.
Yeah, patience not his strong suit, but neither is backing down from a fight.
That's right.
I mean, where do you get the sense this goes from here? And also, what do you make of the fact that even if Hegseth is keen to fight on this, they're floating other names publicly at this point?
Yeah, that's never a good sign. I mean, that also, if you want to compare it to Gates, we never saw sort of alternate names until Gates was already out of the running, and then it was pretty quick to switch to another Floridian, Pam Bondi. Here, the Floridian in waiting could be Governor Ron DeSantis, who we know that Trump has spoken to, at least to some extent, about this role, according to multiple sources who've talked to our colleagues about this across the course of the day. I'm not convinced that DeSantis gets over all the kind of mutual distrust and disaffection between the various Trump and DeSantis camps and ultimately gets selected for this job if it doesn't go to Hegseth. But just the fact that this continues to be an open conversation suggests that Donald Trump may not be in this for the long haul with Pete Hegseth.
Garrett Haake, my friend, thank you for joining us. You know, Chuck, before Gates withdrew his name, you were talking about Trump burning political capital and trying to get him confirmed.
Yeah.
Is that now the situation he's in if he keeps Hegseth in this spot?
Well, I think this is the conversation they got to have with themselves is, okay, maybe he can get through this meeting with Joni Ernst, and she comes away with being cautiously optimistic, right? I can't imagine, given how hard she's worked on the issue of sexual assault in the military, that she's going to come out and endorse him. The question, it'll be something in between, or, you know, and I would, you know, and if she's going to tank him, I think she goes to the president-elect and says, I'm tanking him, and then we see it from there. But let's say there's some sort of, the confirmation hearing itself is going to be ugly. Do you want that? You know, how many of these ugly confirmation hearings you want? It's telling to me, not only did they float folks, they floated folks that will breeze through in this environment.
Yes.
Okay? DeSantis will have no problem. Haggerty, a senator, no problem.
Ernst.
Michael Waltz at this point, right. And Ernst, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, that says a lot to me. Not a little, right? It said, who are they floating? They're floating as conventional as they can get, right? It's not conventional for maybe the Republican Party of 10 years ago, but it's DeSantis
that
is
party's
right.
gone.
That party's gone. Pretty. And everything is on the table when you're dealing with Donald Trump and appointments.
Yeah.
And he wants a certain family member in that U.S. Senate seat in Florida that is open. You can't tell me that the DeSantis float of Defense Secretary Laura Trump for U.S. Senate down there in Florida, that they're somehow disconnected. That's all I'm going to say.
But do you
They're
think,
not disconnected.
But knowing Trump the way that we all know him, if he backs down from this fight now, what is the message that he's sending? When we went into this confirmation process saying, well, this is him testing to see how far he can
and that is
Senate.
a question. And then it becomes, and this could be what some of these Senate Republicans are weighing, which is how many of these folks can you kill of his? And who are you most worried about? Yeah. Right? I've talked to a couple senators who look at it, and it's Tulsi Gabbard that they're the most concerned about. Right? They have real concerns about her in that position in intel, given a lot of unusual travel and unusual relationships that certainly a leader in the intelligence community wouldn't have. And if any rank and file intel person had it, they'd be fired and they'd lose their security clearance. But if you go and get rid of Hegseth, how much, is he going to, I'm with you. How many of these will Donald Trump back down from?
And then how many of these senators who whisper to him behind the scenes, how many of them get primaried in 2026?
Right. So but look, Hegseth has created his own problems here. Absolutely. The lack of disclosures and all this stuff. Whatever you think of Matt Gaetz made it. Donald Trump knew everything there was with Matt Gaetz.
Yeah.
Right? There was nothing that was hidden from Donald Trump here. Clearly, Hegseth hid some stuff.
Yeah, I want to turn to your latest column, too, on President Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter. You write that while people might understand his actions on a personal level, politically, this sets a new precedent. So how significant is that going into a second Trump term where he probably didn't need an excuse to do any of the stuff he was doing?
I understand that, and I've had folks, say, well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but now you've given him a permission slip. Presidential acts, unprecedented any presidential act becomes a permission slip for the next president.
Yeah.
And we have seen this through history, through our own history and how the presidency has worked. Once one thing has happened, suddenly it becomes, well, we've done it before, so, we can do it again type of thing. And that's what this now, and there's two things about this that I think are extraordinarily troubling, not in a small way, but in a big way. The big one is, two of them are. One is the statement that Joe Biden made in and around the pardon, where he essentially used the exact same rhetoric that Donald Trump uses about the justice system. That, it was biased against Hunter Biden. I mean, you could have literally said, I could have said to you, did Donald Trump say this or did
Yeah.
Biden say this, and a lot of people might have said, oh, this is something Trump would say. It's not something we were used to Joe Biden saying about the rule of law and about the justice system. Well, now you have, so forget who started it. You have the leading Democrat in America and the leading Republican in America both agreeing on one thing. The Justice Department has been politicized. That is absolutely that is long-term damaging. This is no longer short-term damaging. This is no longer one election at a time. And then it's that. So now we're in a situation where every party's going to come in, and as they leave, everybody gets their security blanket pardon. Okay, how long do you want it? You want a 10-year window? Because we now have established this 10-year window of whatever you can, this get out of jail free card. Is it going to be June 15th, 2015, the day he came down the escalator, to July 20th, 2029? Well, guess what? There's now a precedent for it. That's what's so damaging about this decision. Guess what? I understand he probably couldn't live with himself if he didn't do it. And ultimately, I get it.
Yeah.
But this has done real damage to the country.
And certainly the people who know the Bidens, including Senator Chris Coons, who I spoke to right before I came here, the thing I asked him about was, you make the point of these two men from different parties seemingly agreeing on the same thing, the politicization of DOJ. But what they don't have in common is the fact that Republicans were never policing Trump. But listen, I asked Chris Coons about if Democrats were doing too much self-policing on that, just given the environment. Listen to what he told me.
I accept the argument that when President-elect Trump moved from campaign rhetoric to action by nominating to run the FBI, to run the Department of Justice, folks who've made it clear that they have as their goal weaponizing that department and going after their political enemies. And the president, his family are frequently on the list of folks that want to go after, that changed his thinking. I do think it's unfortunate that he changed his position on this pardon, but that's the explanation to me as to why he did.
In the few seconds we have left, I mean, what do you make of that?
Again, it's if that was the concern, it goes back to, should he have ever run for president in the first place? He had 3 children in crisis at the time that they decided to run for president, knowing full well the risk of putting the national spotlight on their family was going to do. And was that fair to do that? So, again, the reason his family is in the middle of this is they chose to put their family in the middle of this.
It really has been the central question of covering Biden for the last decade, really.
It's gut-wrenching. Yeah. It makes the phrase Shakespearean more relevant in this case than I think any political story I've covered.
I thought it was absolutely apt that you wrote it that way.
Chuck
Todd, senior, chief, whatever you want to be
Just
called.
look at my senior citizen. Okay, I'm not there yet.
Senior in our hearts.
There you go.
Chuck Todd, thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.